Okay, so you want to own a pharmacy. You picture it immediately. A clean, quiet store, white coats, people walking in with a piece of paper and walking out with whatever they need to feel better. You dispense the medication, you collect the payment, and the insurance company covers most of it anyway. It sounds almost passive, a steady, recession-proof business selling something people will always need, medicine, in a world where people are only getting older and sicker. Here's the problem. The two largest pharmacy chains in the United States, companies with thousands of locations, billions in annual revenue, and decades of brand recognition, are both fighting for survival right now. One closed over 900 locations in a single year. The other filed for bankruptcy protection. Not a startup, not a regional chain, the second largest pharmacy retailer in the entire country. And the reason they're collapsing has almost nothing to do with people buying fewer prescriptions. That's the thing about this business. The demand is real, the need is permanent, and the business is still somehow one of the most structurally dangerous retail operations in the entire economy. Once you understand why, you'll never look at a pharmacy the same way again. My name is David, and you're watching Dollar Horizon. Let's start with what it actually costs to open the front door, because the price tag is far more complicated than most people expect. There are three doors you can walk through: an independent pharmacy, a franchise pharmacy, or a pharmacy inside a larger retail operation. Each one is a completely different business wearing the same white coat. An independent pharmacy is exactly what it sounds like. You own it outright. No corporate parent, no royalty fees, no mandated layout. You set your own prices on front-end retail items, you build relationships directly with your patients, and every dollar of profit stays with you. The startup cost for a small, independent pharmacy runs somewhere between $300,000 and $600,000 once you account for lease deposits, interior build-out, pharmacy dispensing software, initial drug inventory, and state licensing fees. That licensing process alone is not trivial. Every state requires a separate pharmacy license, a pharmacist in charge designation, DEA registration for controlled substances, and a building inspection before a single prescription can be filled. The timeline from signing a lease to legally dispensing a first prescription can run 4 to 6 months minimum, 4 to 6 months of fixed costs with zero revenue coming in. Then there's the franchise route. Brands like Medicine Shop or Medicap offer an established name, a proven layout, group purchasing discounts on drug inventory, and the support network for billing and compliance. In exchange, they charge an upfront franchise fee of around $20,000 to $30,000 and an ongoing royalty of roughly 2 to 4% of gross revenue every single month. The total startup investment for a franchise pharmacy lands somewhere between $400,000 and $900,000, depending on location and build-out requirements. And then there's the option almost nobody outside the industry knows exists: buying an existing independent pharmacy outright. Established pharmacies with a loyal patient base sell for somewhere between 1 and 3 times their annual net profit, a figure called a multiple. A pharmacy generating $200,000 in annual profit might sell for $400,000 to $600,000. It sounds expensive until you realize you're buying something the startup route can never give you: an existing patient base, existing insurance contracts, and an existing relationship with a drug wholesaler that took years to build. But here's the trap that catches almost every first-time owner, regardless of which door they walk through: the drug inventory. A small independent pharmacy typically needs to carry somewhere between $100,000 and $300,000 worth of drug inventory just to open with a functional stock. And unlike a clothing store where unsold merchandise just sits on a shelf, pharmaceutical inventory expires. Medications have strict expiration dates. Stock that doesn't move becomes waste that cannot be returned for full credit. And drug prices don't stay still. A single medication can change in wholesale price multiple times in a single week based on manufacturer decisions entirely outside your control. Now here's where the naive mental model completely breaks down. And this is the part almost nobody outside the industry fully understands until they're already inside it. You assume the business works like this: patient brings prescription, you fill it, insurance pays you, you keep the margin between what insurance pays and what the drug cost you. Simple. Here's what actually happens. The price insurance pays you for a prescription is not set by you. It is not negotiated by you. It is dictated to you by a company most patients have never heard of, a pharmacy benefit manager, or BPM. There are 3 BPMs that control the reimbursement rates for the overwhelming majority of insured prescriptions filled in the United States: CVS Caremark, Express Scripts, and Optum Rx. These 3 companies sit between the insurance plan and the pharmacy, and they decide, unilaterally, how much your pharmacy gets paid for every single drug you dispense. Here's the number that should stop you cold. Independent pharmacies are reimbursed below their cost of acquiring the drug on somewhere between 20 and 30% of the brand name prescriptions they fill. Read that again. They are paid less than they paid for the medication, on roughly 1 in 4 prescriptions. Every time they fill that prescription, they lose money on the transaction before a single overhead cost is counted. This practice has a name in the industry. It's called a negative margin reimbursement, and it's not a glitch. It's a feature of a system specifically designed to make it economically difficult for independent pharmacies to survive, because 2 of the 3 dominant BPMs are owned by the same corporate parents as the largest pharmacy chains. CVS Caremark is owned by CVS Health, which also owns CVS Pharmacy. Optum Rx is owned by Unit Health Group. These companies set the reimbursement rates that your independent pharmacy receives while simultaneously owning the chain pharmacy down the street that competes with you. It is not illegal. It has been investigated by the Federal Trade Commission, which released the report in 2024 describing the BPM system as having significant harmful effects on independent pharmacies and patients. But as of now, the structure remains intact. This is the single most important thing to understand about this business. The price you charge is not your decision. The price you receive is not your negotiation. You are operating inside a pricing system controlled by your largest competitors. So how does any pharmacy make money in a system designed to squeeze its margins on the core product? The answer is the front end. Every pharmacy has 2 revenue streams: the pharmacy itself, prescriptions, insurance billing, drug dispensing, and the front-end retail operation, everything else in the store: greeting cards, cosmetics, vitamins, snacks, seasonal merchandise, photo services, convenience items. Here's the number that reveals everything. The average gross margin on a prescription after BPM reimbursement runs somewhere between 1 and 3%. The average gross margin on a front-end retail item runs between 30 and 40%. A bottle of vitamins that costs the pharmacy $4 sells for $12. A greeting card that costs $0.50 sells for $5. A cosmetic product that costs $3 sells for $9. The prescription is the reason the customer walks through the door. The front-end retail is where the actual money gets made. This is why every major pharmacy chain in the country has systematically expanded its front-end footprint for decades. CVS didn't add a beauty section and a snack aisle because they cared about lipstick. They added it because the margin on lipstick is 20 times the margin on a prescription. But even the front end isn't the most profitable service a modern pharmacy can offer. That distinction belongs to medication therapy management, specialty pharmacy services, and most recently, clinical services. Medication therapy management, or MTM, is a service where a pharmacist conducts a formal review of a patient's complete medication regimen, identifies potential drug interactions, recommends adjustments to the prescribing physician, and documents the entire process. Medicare pays a flat fee for these sessions, somewhere between $60 and $100 per completed review, and the single pharmacist can conduct multiple sessions per day entirely by phone or video. It requires no additional drug inventory, no insurance billing complexity, and the margin is close to pure profit. Specialty pharmacy is the other hidden engine. Specialty drugs, medications for conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, cancer, and rare genetic diseases, can cost anywhere from $5,000 to over $50,000 per month per patient. The reimbursement margins on specialty drugs are dramatically better than standard medications, and the patient relationships are long-term and deeply loyal because these patients depend on consistent, expert dispensing of medications that can be genuinely dangerous if mishandled. A single specialty pharmacy serving 200 patients can generate more revenue than a standard pharmacy serving 2,000. Now let's talk about what happens when this business breaks, because it has broken catastrophically at the largest scale imaginable. Rite Aid, founded in 1962, at its peak over 4,000 locations across the United States, making it one of the three largest pharmacy chains alongside CVS and Walgreens. In October 2023, Rite Aid filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection, the largest pharmacy bankruptcy in American history. The cause was not a lack of customers. Americans were still filling prescriptions every single day. The cause was structural. Rite Aid had accumulated over $4 billion in long-term debt from years of acquisitions and failed expansion strategies. Its reimbursement rates from BPMs had been compressed for years. Its front-end retail operation had failed to compete effectively with general merchandise retailers. And it faced billions of dollars in legal liability from opioid-related lawsuits, settlements, and judgments tied to the role pharmacy chains played in the opioid crisis of the 2000s and 2010s. When the debt payments came due and the legal liabilities crystallized simultaneously, a company with thousands of locations and billions in revenue could not generate enough cash to survive. Walgreens, the second largest pharmacy chain in the country, closed over 900 locations between 2024 and 2025, not because of declining demand, because the unit economics of those individual locations had deteriorated to the point where keeping them open generated losses rather than profits. Their CEO publicly stated that pharmacy reimbursement rates had reached the level where the business model was fundamentally broken. Here is the structural lesson. If companies with thousands of locations, billion-dollar purchasing power, and decades of negotiation experience cannot generate sustainable margins from prescription dispensing, the independent pharmacy owner operating a single location has almost no chance of surviving on prescription revenue alone. The pharmacies that survive are the ones that stopped thinking of themselves as prescription dispensing operations and started thinking of themselves as healthcare service providers who happen to fill prescriptions on the side. Let's put real numbers on what a full year actually looks like for a small independent pharmacy. In the optimistic scenario, a well-located independent pharmacy filling around 200 prescriptions per day generates roughly $2.5 to $3.5 million in annual prescription revenue. After PBM reimbursements, drug acquisition costs, and dispensing overhead, the net margin on the prescription side lands somewhere around 2 to 4%, generating $50,000 to $140,000 in prescription profit annually. The front-end retail operation, if managed well, can add another $400,000 to $700,000 in annual revenue at margins of 30 to 35%, generating another $120,000 to $245,000 in gross profit. Add medication therapy management fees, immunization revenue, and any specialty pharmacy services, and total annual profit for a well-run independent pharmacy can land somewhere between $150,000 and $350,000 before the owner's salary. In the realistic scenario, PBM reimbursement rates compress further, which they have done every single year for the past decade. A competing chain opens nearby and captures a portion of the prescription volume. Front-end retail sales underperform because the independent cannot match the marketing budget or the product selection of a chain. And a single audit from a PBM, a process called a direct and indirect remuneration fee or DIR fee, claws back tens of thousands of dollars in reimbursements the pharmacy had already received and spent months earlier. Under those conditions, the same pharmacy that generated $200,000 in profit the previous year can slide into a loss of $50,000 to $150,000, not because fewer people needed prescriptions, but because the pricing system surrounding those prescriptions quietly shifted against the owner in ways they had no power to control or predict. Here's the structural observation that explains everything we just walked through. A pharmacy is not a retail business that happens to sell medicine. It is a healthcare infrastructure business that is simultaneously dependent on and controlled by the insurance systems that fund it. The product, medication, is permanently in demand. The customer, a sick or aging patient, is loyal almost by necessity. The location, embedded in a neighborhood for decades, is irreplaceable, and yet the margin on the core product is set by a third party with a direct financial interest in keeping that margin as low as possible. The pharmacies that survive this structure are the ones that recognize the prescription was never the business, it was the relationship. And the relationship, once built across years of filling medications, counseling patients, administering vaccines, and managing complex drug regimens, becomes something no PBM can reprice and no chain competitor can easily replicate. The front door of a pharmacy is one of the most frequently visited storefronts in the entire American economy. The average patient visits their pharmacy more often than they visit their doctor. That foot traffic is worth an enormous amount. The pharmacies that figure out how to monetize it beyond the prescription label are the ones that survive. The ones that don't keep filling prescriptions at negative margins until the math wins.